How's it going, everybody? This is Jacob, and I am the guy who has not come up with a catchphrase yet to say at the beginning of videos, but what I have done is thought about what I wanted my very first video on the Nemesis Comics channel to be, and I think I sprang upon a truly great idea. But after that idea was quickly shot down by my fellows here, I quickly went to work on a plan B. What are my top 10 favorite Spider-Man comic stories of all time? Because if there's one thing I'm good at, it's winning first place at Robert Pattinson lookalike contests. But if there was a second thing I'm good at, it would be rambling about Spider-Man. So let's whip our webs and swing right into the ranking. Now's probably a good time to warn for slight spoilers for any of these stories that I bring up. If they're newer, I'll try to keep it very slight, so you can pick them up yourselves if you'd like. And if they're older ones, I mean, come on. What excuse do you really have? Number 10. Venom. Spider-Man's rogue gallery can be matched only by The Dark Knight in terms of quality, and Todd McFarlane created a doozy of an edition with Venom. After Spider-Man returns home to find Mary Jane distraught over being approached by a black-suited Spider-Man-y figure, the old webhead takes off to find out who this imposter is. What follows is a knockdown, drag-out brawl with this instantly iconic new foe. Number 9. Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine. Now, this is going to be the biggest of this list for most people. Well, actually probably the second biggest, but we'll unpack that later on. But this series is one of my personal favorites, as it highlights one of the greatest bromances in comics, Spider-Man and Wolverine. Their friendship takes center stage in this crazy time travel adventure that, if you haven't read, you should seriously check it out. Jason Aaron is most well known for his killer Thor runs, but this might actually be my favorite work of his. Number 8. The Death of SpiderMan. Now, I'm a die-hard 616 Spider-Man fan. Don't believe me? Check my Tinder profile. But I have to admit that Ultimate Comics nailed the death of Spider-Man in their universe. This story is brutal, raw, and most importantly, heartfelt. I'm one of those people who cries like a dove. So it doesn't take much to get the waterworks going. But this comic certainly made me shed some tears. Number 7. Renew Your Vows. Now, call me old-fashioned, but I'm really not a big fan of my costume superheroes making deals with lords of hell to end their marriages. So when Spider-Man did just that, you can rest assured that I was both very upset that Marvel would take that direction, but mostly just very startled that my extremely specific pet peeve actually played out. But when Marvel announced that they would be bringing back Spider-Man's marriage, I was as giddy as a schoolgirl on homecoming night. My giddiness lessened when I learned it would be for a limited series taking place in an alternate reality, but hey.
When life gives you lemons!
Luckily, the story itself was stellar, and seeing Peter as not only a husband again, but a father too, was incredibly rewarding. Number 6. The Superior SpiderMan. I still remember being a strapping young lad and heading to my local comic book shop to buy Amazing Spider-Man number 700. I flipped through the pages, got to the end, and I was furious. How could they let Doc Ock be Spider-Man? That's no way to treat my favorite fictional character. I even made a threatening Facebook post at the time that I'm sure just sent a ripple of fear through Marvel Comics at the time. But then time passed and I kept hearing about how good the run actually was. So I finally broke down and read it. And just, wow. Seeing Doc Ock take on the mantle of Spider-Man was incredibly unsettling, but it was supposed to be. He was brutal, calculating, and self-centered. Basically all of the power, none of the responsibility. But heck man, if it wasn't a good read, it made you long for Peter's return. And it's that finale where the story truly shines. The Green Goblin shows up to not only show how he has always been Octavius's better, but that Peter was as well. So when Otto finally concedes that Peter is the superior Spider-Man and returns his body to him, we get one of the greatest Green Goblin Spider-Man exchanges in all of comics. Number 5. The Origin. No list of Spider-Man's greatest stories would be complete without the one that started it all. Spider-Man's origin story is so ingrained into pop culture that there's really no need for me to recap it here. Instead, I think it's important to highlight how easily this could have all gone wrong. Stan Lee took a huge leap in making Peter Parker a teenager, seeing as characters that age were usually reserved to sidekicks at the time. But he also did a fantastic job of giving the character a dramatic and believable growth in just one issue. Also, side note, Steve Ditko did wonders with the costume design, especially considering what the original look was going to be. Not to mention that Stan Lee was constantly being told about how no one would want a superhero based on a spider. I mean, who likes spiders, right? I think it's safe to say they were wrong on that one. Number 4. How Green Was My Goblin. Norman Osborn is my favorite villain in all of fiction, and it's stories like these that really cement him as Spidey's true arch-nemesis as well. Taking place in Amazing Spider-Man 39, this story shows the calculating and cold nature of the Goblin as he stalks Spider-Man throughout the city, setting a trap to wear down his senses so he can strike at him at his most vulnerable and become the first person to uncover Spidey's true identity, before revealing his own to Peter and the reader themselves. A huge moment that set up for so much more history between these two characters down the line. Number 3. Peter Parker, the Spectacular SpiderMan, number 310. One of the greatest things about Spider-Man stories are that they can be crazy, knockdown, drag-out brawls, or heartfelt small moments. This one is certainly the latter. I actually don't want to say too much about this one because it's a single issue and I think every Spidey fan should read it. The basic gist is that a young man decides to interview people around New York to see their opinions about Spider-Man. That's all you need to know. Go out there, buy it, you'll love it.
I guarantee it.
Number 2. SpiderMan Blue.
That rhymed. Unintentional.
I think the best way to describe Spider-Man Blue would be as a love letter to not only the titular character, but his first true love as well. In fact, the whole story is framed as a recording that Peter is leaving for Gwen years after her death. We then flash back to a tense standoff between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. From there, the story moves at a flawless pace, from action set pieces to great character moments. It's a must-own for any Spidey fan, and it more than deserves the number 2 spot on this list. Honorable mentions. I'm sure as any comic book fan can attest, 10 spots isn't nearly enough to highlight every great story in a character's history. So here are a few stellar tales that didn't quite make the cut. If This Be My Destiny, the Clone Saga miniseries, Life Story, the Hobgoblin Saga, The Conversation, The Kid Who Collects Spider-Man, and Kraven's Last Hunt. So that means that it's finally time to reveal my number 1 pick.
Drum roll, please.
Number 1, The Night Gwen Stacy Died. I don't think that a lot of people realize just how truly revolutionary this story was at the time. This was the first major comic story to kill off such an important main character like Gwen. But that's not all this comic has going for it. John Romita Sr. brings his A-game, delivering some of the best work of his entire career, while the ever-awesome Stan Lee fills the story with tension as we watch the last strands of Norman Osborn's sanity slip away, making way for the return of the Green Goblin. All of this culminates in a heart-pounding face-off that tragically ends in Spider-Man's second greatest failure and one of the most iconic panels in the history of comics. So what did you think of the list? Are there any glaring omissions, or did you find it to be stronger than Spidey's guilt complex? Whatever the case, comment your thoughts down below and make sure to subscribe. I look forward to the feedback, especially from you Last Hunt fans. But until next time, I've been Jacob, and until I find an irradiated spider to propel my life into new heights of power and responsibility, you can catch me right here at Nemesis Comics.
Hey there, friends, foes, and all those in between. If you guys want to see more content from us, make sure you subscribe, ring that bell for notifications, and if you have any comments or questions that you really want to know, leave them down below, and we'll see you guys next time.